Steve, welcome to
Thank you.
this dialogue. Welcome everyone who is here with us. I am Oana Juncu that will host this interview with you today. I love to call myself an Agile Leadership DJ that mixes whatever practices make people proud of themselves. And this dialogue is from a series in the Agile20Reflect Festival to celebrate 20 years of the Agile Manifesto. Also, before we start, I would just briefly invite you to open, if you want, the link that is on my page, and I will put it also in the chat. It's a link to a wall, what it's called the Ideas Wall. And if there's anything that inspires you in this interview, any insight and idea, just grab a post-it on the mural, and you can put it there. It's pretty simple. It has 3 sections: past, present, and future of Agile. So feel free to put your idea, whatever you think that's an insight on the past of the Agile, the present of Agile, or the future of Agile. And because I've mentioned future, this is the topic of our Fireside dialogue, Steve, the future of Agile leadership. I have a great pleasure to welcome you tonight and host this interview with Steve Hollier, who's really a thought leader around leadership and Agile leadership. I've met Steve, I think, 12 years ago or something in an Agile retrospective retreat gathering. I think that was the first time in a retrospective gathering.
It was the Agile Leader Europe conference, because I have not been to a retrospective retreat gathering, unfortunately.
Okay. So anyway, that's just to say that Steve is a very long time dear friend. And he is really a thought leader in the leadership area. So Steve, who are you, if you want to present yourself?
Oh, sure. Yes, like you said, I'm Steve Hollier. I live in Zurich, Switzerland, and I've lived here for 20 years. So I moved here just a couple of weeks before the so-called Agile Manifesto was signed. It turns out, I'm just realizing. But I moved from the US. I moved from the southern part of the US, as you might hear by my southern drawl, which I've almost eliminated, but I bet you can still hear it if you listen. I came to Agile an unusual way, maybe. When I left the United States, the team that I was working with, that I had just left, 2 weeks after I left, they hired James Grinning and a couple other people. James Grinning was one of the signatories of the Agile Manifesto. They hired them to coach them on XP, and they were writing me about what they were discovering with extreme programming. And I said, oh my gosh, I got out of there just in time. I never want to do that. But it's because what I was hearing wasn't about all the great, they were very excited about it. I was just hearing the things that didn't sound so great to me. They were living it and they were loving it. But it took me almost another 10 years before I was working with a company that might have been the worst company that I've ever worked with. They funded one of the owners. Am I telling too much? I probably am. One of the people who owned that company also invested in Paris Hilton's movie. So that might tell you something I don't know. So I was working, this was the company I worked in. My life wasn't very good in this company. And I was at lunch with the senior developers, like you go to lunch with the senior developers, and one of them says, well, I bet you couldn't get our management to pay for you to go to an Agile course. And you don't say to a Texan and a Mississippian, I bet you can't do something. So I said, I will take that bet and I will get them to send me to a Scrum course. And I went to that Scrum course, one, because they had told me they didn't think I could convince management to pay for it. Such a lofty idea. And two, I went to learn all the ways to fight Agile because I had this idea that I wanted to keep this as far away from me as possible. And this turned out to be a great Scrum Master course halfway through it. I thought, well, gee, if we were actually working about doing about half the things I'm learning in this course, this job, which I really don't, is not making impact. They've never released any software in several years. All of these issues, I think, would be much different. I would love my job. So right after that, I said, you can't learn to be a Scrum Master by taking a two-day course, not a great Scrum Master. So I went to find where Scrum was being practiced in Zurich, what I considered the best, a really good example of Scrum, and pretty much shamelessly begged them for a job so I could learn what this was by doing it. They hired me, and that was, then we've just been on the way ever since. And now I have my own company. I'm working as an Agile coach and trainer in open space leadership and open space facilitation, and loving what I'm doing. And in this time of pandemic, needing to do more of it, actually. So,
thank you, Steve, for your stories and giving us the opportunity to know you better, know your story better. On leadership, the first question that I really wanted us to ask you, if you had a metaphor of what leadership is, what would that be?
You know what? I really should have a metaphor for that. And you let me know you're going to be asking this question. I thought I really should have come up with a great metaphor. You know what? Also in my life, I've discovered that penguins are very special animals, and I spend as much time as I can with penguins. And I thought, well, how can I make this my metaphor? How can I answer with a penguin metaphor? As far as we know, penguins don't have a very hierarchical leadership structure. There is some indication that there are penguins that take more of an alpha role in a colony, but there is really no indication that there are strong leaders and followers in a penguin colony. What the penguins need to do is they need to do their business every day, which is catching fish to feed themselves and their offspring. They've organized themselves so that there is very few distinctions between the male penguins and the female penguins. That's why people can't tell the difference between a male and a female penguin without a blood test. They can tell the difference, but they both share the work equally, the work of raising the offspring and the work of catching the fish. Now, when they go out to catch the fish, it appears that they follow just a few simple rules, which is go where the fish are, stick with your colony. I will say they fly, because they actually fly in the water. They fly in the same type of formations that you see starlings flying in, because they are following the general direction of the rest. They are going where the nourishment is. And another simple rule they of course follow is stay out of the way of the predators. And that allows them to organize themselves into these very sophisticated looking structures for hunting. We've also realized they do communicate. We don't know exactly how they communicate, but they are apparently able to communicate with each other during this. So they don't just follow their rules, they also continually check in and communicate with each other. So I'm going to say that's my metaphor for leadership. I want to be more like a penguin, and I would love for the rest of us to be more like penguins.
So if that's so interesting, because it prepares me for my after next question, because the question what you said inspired me to ask right now is, if you summarize the qualities of a leadership of a penguin, what are they? What are they? A penguin leadership manifesto right now.
Yes, let's hear it for the Penguin Leadership Manifesto. Well, they understand, I would say, they understand the constraints. They need to catch enough nourishment to feed themselves, get back to the colonies where the offspring are, feed the offspring so that the offspring grow to enough maturity to also join the group hunting. So they understand those constraints. They understand where the food is. They know the simple rules that they're going to be able to follow to do that. So I would say, let's see, leadership manifesto. So an Agile leader, a penguin leader, is transparent about the rules of the game, and is clear about not only the rules of the game, but the constraints along which the game is going to be played. And then the penguin leader very much would, with that transparency and those clear constraints, would very much step back and allow the leadership within the entire colony or the entire waddle of penguins to take place, and only, let's see, the penguin leader's interventions would be by creating more transparency, making more space for the penguins to hunt within, and basically enabling the rest of the colony to continue and grow. I just came up with that just off the top of my head. So if I've left something off, I'm kind of going to hedge my bet by saying, if you talk to me about it tomorrow, I might have thought of something new. But yes, thank you. That's my next book, the Manifesto of Penguin Leadership. We'll start writing it right now. I said my next book, my first book as well, let's be honest.
Well, happy to be at service. And if you apply these to humans, how can teams and organizations follow the example?
Well, I think we're familiar with the traditional way that humans have been leading organizations for many, many years. And that's often by considering that the person who is the leader must be right. There's this kind of this joke, I'm right if I'm wrong. See, the first rule number one is the boss is always right. Rule number two is if the boss is wrong, see rule number one. That's kind of a traditional approach. That approach also means the person with the person with the most merit for leadership is automatically the leader. By having merit for leadership, that means you're right. That means you're the leader. Certainly in times of chaos and disruption and change, that might not be always, that might not be the optimal way to organize the group. We might want to consider instead that everybody in the group is working within the problem and within the chaos. We need, in a chaotic situation, we need somebody who's willing to stand up and say, this is the direction, follow me, and people will follow, except it's not saying, I have all the answers. This is saying, I want to go this direction, will you follow me? Everybody that comes along knows a little bit about that problem. You're working together to solve the most important problems together, as everybody knows something about it. It's not just the leader who has that, the one solution to dictate to everybody else. I feel like I might be rambling here a bit, but I hope that this is showing you kind of the direction that I think and advise. Now the question is, how do you teach? How do you help people understand this? Maybe I shouldn't be asking the question, you're interviewing me, but a question comes up is, how are you going to teach people who have led in a more traditional way how this might actually work? in real life. Because I mean, if you just hear that, like, that could never work. And a lot of people say that could never work.
Before I'm asking the next question, I realized that with a hustle with a link, I forgot to mention that this will be about 40 minutes interview with you, and then we'll have 20, maybe only 15 minutes of questions from the people, the participants that are here with us. Thank you to be here, and you'll answer. So yeah, I just wanted to say that before asking the next question. And my next question, you mentioned chaos and disruption, and for me, these are fascinating topics. So what is the posture of a leader in setups or situations of chaos?
I think as a leader, you have many postures to choose from. Mm-hmm. And I think in working with companies on agile transformations, I've seen it's almost like you can identify certain archetypes that you're going to find in leadership in every company, and you're going to find most of them, I think. I haven't listed them all out for myself, but there is one leader who has the weight of everything on their shoulders. Mm-hmm. She feels responsible for making sure things don't go wrong, and this is a really difficult place to be. And I admire this person so well, because while other leaders are thinking in a visionary standpoint, this leader with the weight of the world on their shoulders is really thinking, how are we going to pay the bills and keep this company operating? And it's often this leader who's maybe most critical about the agile transformation, because the agile transformation may not be giving this leader the comfort to feel like everything's going to work out okay without having, this leader, this group of leaders needs to make sure that whatever's happening with the agile business and the agile transformation, this leader needs to make sure that everything is channeled in the right direction and everything's going to get done, because we need to pay the bills. Yeah, I think I've forgotten your question as I started.
My question was, what is the quality that a leader should have in a situation of chaos?
Yeah. So in this chaotic situation, you have the leaders who are very concerned that everything happens in an orderly, structured way for really great reasons, because we need to pay the employees, we need to make a profit for our stakeholders, we need to sell our product. But in these times of chaos, these well-structured plans just collapse, or go up in smoke. We're sitting by at a fireside chat, so they just go up. All these well laid out plans just go up in smoke, and we all experienced that last year when this pandemic came, and suddenly everything was different. Talk about chaos. I mean, there could be more chaos. War would be more chaotic, but talk about chaos. We hit this pandemic time, and suddenly, what are we going to do with our best laid plans? Well, we could try to follow those best laid plans even more strongly. So you have people in this pandemic time saying, well, we need to monitor everybody to make sure that they're on Zoom and they're paying attention to the Zoom screen and follow these rules. Or a leader in times of chaos can look a different direction to leadership and saying, in a time of chaos, according to various theories like the Cynefin framework, in this time of chaos, the leader is the person who stands up and suggests a direction, basically any direction, but uses intuition and knowledge, experience to say, let's go this direction, and then gathers a group of people around them to start going that direction. And then the group is able to learn from each other, adapt in the chaos. In the penguin colony, hunt the fish, even if the fish have moved in a different direction. And in this way, the chaotic situation, it's an organic response to the chaotic situation. And it's an organic response to the chaotic situation, and slowly new ways start presenting themselves. Now, of course, this leader might have chosen a wrong direction, because in this time of chaos, do you even know what the right direction is? So that's also part of the leadership is, okay, check, are we going the right direction? Well, maybe we should move a little bit to a different direction. I think that's where we're looking at leadership in times of chaos. I mean, there's people that have done a lot more work on this than I have. So I hope, I'm doing some justice here, but this is kind of my intuitive approach to your question.
You mentioned actually that leadership in times of chaos know to use their intuition and then recognize that they are wrong. This is what I summarize from your answer. Is that correct?
I think that's a huge aspect of it. There's, in addition to that intuition, it's being able to trust the people that are around you. It's being able to set direct, to encourage confidence in the people around you to follow this direction without insisting that, also without insisting, hey, let's go this direction. The people that gather around me to go this direction are the people I'm leading in this direction. I think that's enough. That's, in addition to that, listening to the intuition, that's the rest, kind of more of that story.
Going back to leadership, and this is a question I'm really found to ask. Do you have an example of leadership, a role model? And if you do, what are her or his qualities?
Yeah. Oh man, that shouldn't be a hard question. But who would I say is a role model?
Use your intuition, Steve.
Yes. I think more of places that I've worked, or people that I've worked with. The people that the leaders who are very cognizant of the fact that every person in the group has a portion of the answer. And what is interesting in many Agile circles with very prominent Agile leaders, Agile coaches, and Agile consultants, very prominent Agile leaders. And I have to also say, I'm not sure that I always practice what I preach. I'm not going to put myself in their position necessarily, but we encounter these situations where you're working on an Agile team with somebody who's prominently well-known in Agile leadership, who in these times falls back on saying, I'm the Agile expert. I know all the answers. I'm going to tell you what those answers are. And I'm going to give lip service to listening to the group, but I'm really not leading in that direction. So how have I answered your question? I've said that I'm looking at personal role models in my life, and I'm thinking also saying, I recognize I don't think it's right, at least as often as when I recognize, I recognize what I feel is wrong as often as I recognize when I feel it's right. So I don't know what that's telling us, but that's okay. We have work to do here. You asked about who would be a role model. As I get to know more and more role models, I begin to notice we all have feet of clay. So I don't want to say that I'm any, I hope that my responses in these situations are in keeping with what I consider good Agile leadership. And I know in many cases, I've also not I've not reacted in the chaos the way I would like other people to react. I fall also back on the way I was what I learned, how my family was, everything else. And having said all that, I do really admire the work of Harrison Owen, who they say discovered open space technology, because I think he's really thought, I don't know how much he's clearly really thought about what this type of leadership can look like. I also think he probably discovered it with his intuition first, and then thought about it, why this worked. I'm pretty sure from his writings, he discovered it by intuition first, and then thought about why it worked later. So I would say, if I needed to name a role model, I really like the way that Harrison Owen talks about leadership in his work.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. You mentioned Harrison Owen and open space, and I know that you have a major contribution to open space and open space leadership. Leadership by invitation, what I would call. Can you tell us more about open space leadership and open space? I don't know if everyone in that will hear this interview is familiar with open space. So if you can briefly describe open space and open space leadership.
Sure. Well, I mean, I would like my contribution for open space to be in the way we practice open space within the Agile community, because I mean, there's been a lot of people who have contributed a lot, and often people contribute to open space just by being there in the space and finding the answers to the questions that are posed. I would like to contribute by thinking about how we use open space in what we call the Agile community. Now, open space, let's see, it was discovered, Harrison Owen first discovered open space in the mid-'80s. So it's been around for quite a while, quite a while longer than our Agile manifesto. And the idea, maybe the basic idea, is if you get a bunch of people who are passionate about a topic and also feel responsible for finding a solution to that topic or that question, you've got what it takes to have the right people to address those questions or answer that topic. So in this chaotic situation, if you can define what the chaotic problem is and find people who are passionate about knowing a solution and feel responsible for finding the solution, get them together and suggest, okay, let's start moving this direction. You have what it takes to say we've got the right people to address that. So there's some principles to an open space event. It's usually, I like to think of open space as an event as a period of time that's carved out where you're following 4 principles. Whoever comes is the right people. It starts whenever it starts is the right time. When it's over, it's over. And whatever happens is the only thing that could. There might be a 5th principle. Wherever it happens is the only place it's could. With those principles and this one so-called law of mobility, there's this natural law that says, if I'm not giving value or receiving value in the place I am, let me move to the place where I can give or receive value. And I definitely have observed penguins doing this. If they're not giving or receiving value where they are, they're going to go someplace else. And if you try to pick them up, as I have when I was working with penguins, to take them someplace else, they will bite you, because they won't allow their mobility to be restricted. So that's how an open space event works. How you gather people around this, how the right people come, that's not a magical invocation that, we announced an open space, these people came, therefore they're the right people. No, the right people are the ones who have the passion for the question you're asking and the responsibility to find answers, feel the responsibility to find answers. So that means it's the open space leader's job to figure out a question that ignites that passion and also taps into that responsibility. So what we see is people love open space because it's an open space event well, many people love an open space event because it feels free and feels different from where we are. We feel energy, we feel like things are getting done. And people see that and go, oh, well, that means I can hold a meeting without an agenda because this open space event had no agenda. And we see often in the Agile space, people have lifted these concepts into Agile organizations and said, well, we're going to do open space. That means you just come, there's no agenda, we'll figure it out. And well, that's a good start. But I would like to know who's invited the people together. Why have they been invited together? The right people are coming if you have ignited their passion. So what is the topic? What is the topic that invites? What is the really important question that brings people together with this passion? I probably have forgotten your question again. But
describe what is the open space leadership?
So yes, so that's open space. I think open space leadership is thinking, how I work. Okay, let me think about this. I worked with a company in Switzerland before the pandemic, and they had many high-powered consultants in, and I was working for an organization. We wouldn't be considered the high-powered consultants, but we were coming after the high-powered consultants. And they had so many presentations on Agile this and Agile that, and you would work with this organization and you'd hear, we have to do a sprint because a sprint is this. And I'm like, oh, I've never heard a sprint defined that way, but okay, let's go from there. Or there was a lot of confusion about how any group of people could actually work in the ways that the consultants had described. At the same time, the director of that organization said, I really need your help, Steve. This is the first day I met him. I really need your help. I can't believe it. Sounds like I made this up, but he literally said, the wrong people come to the meetings. How do we get the right people there? And then he said, once the people come, it never starts on time. And then once it starts, it never ends on time. And you know what? After the meeting, I don't think the right thing happened. And I said, well, gee, he just listed the 4 principles of open space. I don't think I have a choice but to suggest we hold an open space with that group. So we did. I worked with the leader there to what is the big question you want to answer? And how do we phrase that in an open way that we can invite everybody? And we did just 4 hours of open space, which isn't very much. But at the end of that 4 hours, people thought, we're saying, oh, I don't know, they always put the words on it, but what they were saying, maybe without the words, is this is how self-organization works. This is how we do organize ourselves. And it wasn't so much about all these theories and buzzwords that they had heard from the consultants. It's like, we spent this time working this way, self-organized. We made more progress in those 4 hours than we've made in months. Mm-hmm. How can we keep working this way? Mm-hmm. So I think that's the next question comes on, how do we keep working this way? How do you take this kind of rarefied event that operates under these principles, where you spent time coaching the leaders on how to create a great invitation? How do you take that and move it into the way that the group works from day to day? So that's, learning from those experiences. Leaders are crafting invitations, inviting people with passion and responsibility to work on it. And then how do we take our whatever working structure we have and make it so that that law of nobility is active and works? And how do we find those same principles in these day-to-day activities? I think that's something we're still looking for answers for. But
yeah, what I it's important. There are key principles of leadership that you are saying as helping leaders to craft a great invitation, trigger or create a space for responsibility, passion and responsibility, and then holding a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question would be, maybe the last question, is how does a leader, or how does Agile leadership, because we're in Agile, help create a safe space that will also help to propagate or pollinate this type of events?
I think this is a question we're still looking for answers to. There's been a lot of, talk from various people, which I find very, I really resonates about creating psychological safety, which doesn't mean that everybody is, that nobody has their feelings hurt. It means that everybody feels that they can speak their minds without being punished for it, which then starts to ask the question, well, how do you speak your mind without being punished for it if what you speak is going to hurt somebody else in the group? So there's a lot of work, there's a lot of ways to feel ourselves out there. In an open space event, what I teach facilitators, what I'm teaching facilitators about the open space mindset that allows you to hold space for people. You set the basic guidelines for the open space, and then you let the people figure it out, because every time you interject to help somebody figure it out, you're signaling this isn't really your space to figure out, it's my space to direct you. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a challenge to create these safe spaces, because we live in a world where white men have the most safety, and people who aren't white men have less safety. And depending on your situation where you are, you can have significantly less safety than the straight white man. So we get a group of people together and say, okay, here's just a few constraints. Organize yourself. How do we create safety for everyone? I think we're still looking for the answers there, but I think part of that answer is make all the information you have transparent and visible. Mm. Respect each other. This is going to be controversial. I understand the needs for creating rules about codes of conducts and things like that to protect people, and at the same time, you're saying this isn't their space to solve. It's the people who created the code of conducts space to create that safety issue. So we're working on, how do you set the stage and make the invitation to say every voice that's in this room has an important thing to say, and together, how do we all listen to each other? And so it's a safe space for everybody. And I think that the leader's attitude, the stories the leader tells, the way the leader tells the stories, that creates a safe space. The way people react in this environment determines whether the space is safe or not. This law of mobility is really interesting when it comes to safety. We say it's a law not because it's a rule that you must follow, but it's because it's a natural law. If you don't follow this, open space won't happen. So it's a law of nature, not a rule that you're going to get a fine. And the law of mobility, if you're in a place where you're neither giving nor receiving value, go someplace else. And we feel that our mobility is restricted and we stay in unsafe situations. But if we had true mobility and found ourselves in an unsafe situation, we would leave and gather with other people who also care about that same safety. And, I'm sounding like Pollyanna here, because I don't think this is, Pollyanna, who everything works out for Pollyanna. The fictional character Pollyanna, in case anybody's trying to figure out which Pollyanna I'm talking about. I'm speaking in, very glowing, almost magical terms. So I think there's a lot more to it than this. But I have also encountered, by staying in a place where a group of white men are not listening to any other voices, by simply saying, I don't want to hear those voices anymore, and moving to another space, you've opened up a new space of safety for everybody else who doesn't want to hear those voices. Now, I'm not just putting it on the responsibility of the people who move. That doesn't seem fair at all, but I think that's part of the answer.
Thank you so much, Steve. So I suggest you on these two so important elements that are inclusion and the quality of listening, to go to listen to the question and include the participants and include their questions. And there's a question by Valia. Steve, can you describe a sprint for us? So Valia, if you want to put your question yourself, you can unmute and put your camera on. If not,
hold on. Yeah. Hi there. Hi there.
Hello. Hello.
I apologize in advance. The dog may bark because it's his playtime. So sorry. Yeah. So Steve, I've been I work in the product development for food. You know, biscuits and crackers and you name it. And we've talked about doing sprints. And sometimes I think, yes, you can sprint, but you still need to take time to make something and bake it and whatever. So it kind of, it felt as a buzzword that we didn't know what it was. And so can you talk to us about sprints, please?
I hope so. It is a buzzword. So you felt right. It is a buzzword. And different people mean different things when they say it as well. So I mean, the first question is what kind of sprint are you talking about? Because this organization I mentioned, that there was so many strange, what I found to be strange definitions of sprint. After listening for a while, I realized they were talking about design sprints, with some understanding that comes out of this Google concept that you get a group of people together and you design something. And it wasn't about creating the product, it was about designing something. And as soon as I said, okay, you're talking about a design sprint, then I know where we're talking. You know, for Scrum practitioners, and I started my Agile journey as a Scrum practitioner, you know, a sprint is a short interval of time that just that repeats again and again. And in that period of time, you start with a goal and you work for that interval, and at the end of that interval, you've produced something which you do try to release for feedback, hopefully release directly to the customer for feedback, although that's not always the case. That's a strict Scrum definition. Well, it's a fairly strict Scrum definition of a sprint. And people's understanding kind of is everywhere from there to between that and the design sprint and something else. So a lot of people say, a sprint is what I can do in 2 weeks. And I don't really think that fits my definition of sprint, because there's no goal. There's really no end result. It's just what, I mean, you leave me alone for 2 weeks and see what I get done. I've watched a lot of TV and gone to the zoo to visit penguins, and that's about it. So I don't know how can I help you answer? That's kind of my general answer. So how can I help you answer something more specific?
No, I think that actually puts it in, gives me a good understanding.
There's a dog.
Yeah.
I feel like one thing that's often missing in Agile workplaces is there's the people doing the work in the sprint don't necessarily understand a useful vision of everything, nor do they understand what they're trying to accomplish over the next period of time. And so they're given, here's a bunch of tasks, you should complete those in 2 weeks. And that's really hard to be successful at. So I like to work with people who, at the first things you do is help people get shared vision and understanding and mission. And then I mean, people will argue with me here, but I'd like to say you get the right group of people together that say, in this period of time, maybe 2 weeks, what can we start and how can we move that to the finish? And how does that get us closer to our mission? That's what I want to see myself.
Thank you, Steve. Valia, is the answer okay for you? Brilliant, thank you. Any other question? Steve, there's Francois that just mentioned in the chat that Harris and Owen published at Penguin. No coincidence here.
There is no coincidence life.
Well, having said that, any other question from the participants? To Steve.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would have one. Sorry, I'm in my car, so this is why I don't activate
Okay.
video because I'm not sure about the bandwidth. Sorry for that.
No problem.
My question, Steve, would be, speaking about servant leadership, I heard recently that there was some questioning about that notion of servant. Honestly, I liked, and I still like actually. Do you have some thought about it or an opinion? What's so yeah, what's the fact that the people don't like in being a servant for a team? And
Yeah, I don't know if I have specific thoughts. As an American originally, I have a hard time understanding what's meant by servant leadership, because I think for Americans, there's a lot of cultural baggage around it. What does this even mean? And by cultural baggage, I'm thinking more of our Christian background that do unto other, turn the other cheek. These Christian ideas of turn the other cheek. Basically, the idea that a good Christian, and I think this is a good Christian, but a good Christian is doing things for others. I mean, that's kind of the cultural baggage we have under servant leadership. So when you say you're in a company, you're the manager, and you have to be a servant leader, I think there's a lot. You're like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I just go make coffee for everybody and bring them coffee? And I've had that idea. For me, I think the definition of what it means to be a servant leader has never really came through to me. These talk about servant leadership started in the 70s, and by the time I came along, people just used the term as a buzzword. The way I would say for myself, I think servant leadership is with open space leadership is inviting as many people as you can to the conversation, finding out where, igniting that passion, and then serving the group by letting the group know where the constraints and the boundaries are, and by just being present to let the group figure out the best solution. You have some expertise, and you'll of course want to share that at the appropriate time without taking away from the group's ability to solve the problem. And I'm not sure that's what other people would call servant leadership. That's what I'm calling servant leadership.
I fully agree. On my side, it may start with the coffee, but in the end, it's more how to grow the team with their individuals.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
And by the way, also letting them express what they feel like, and as you said, I completely agree with that parallelism with the open space, the definition that you have.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I started by serving the coffee myself, just like you said. That's where I started, and then I learned that serving the coffee or the Diet Coke is only getting us so far. There's more to it than that. When the Scrum Guide has changed the definition of servant leadership, and I got involved in that discussion back in December when it first happened, and now I can't really remember, but I did find that at least some of the discussion seemed to be thinking. Some people wanted to take that. I shouldn't even mention it because I've forgotten the details, but that has been a controversy in the Scrum community just in the last couple months, because now the Scrum Guide has been changed to say the Scrum Master is a real leader. So what's the difference between a real leader and a servant leader? I think the answer that the Scrum authors meant was a servant leader is a real leader, but that's not how everybody read that change. So I think there's where you get some new controversy.
The controversies we live by.
Yeah. What will we do without these controversies to debate on Twitter?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Steve. Lois, how are we doing with the answer?
I'm very good indeed, because I mean, as we said, starting with the coffee, I like the idea of starting with a posture of humility, even vulnerability. But indeed, I think you are right also, Steve, you mentioned right at the beginning, maybe it's linked also to the cultural package we have, and maybe that's something I cannot feel on my side more as a European/Christian, even if I'm not religious, but yeah, indeed. Yeah, thanks a lot for that exchange.
Sure. Now, I do have a feeling that for Americans, there's quite a lot of ideas and cultural baggage behind the term, and I couldn't even put it into words, but I feel like as an American, there is a lot of baggage there. So, and I think you're right, it maybe doesn't translate. I don't know.
Well, if I may add something from a European perspective, as I perceive the difference of why servant leadership is a little bit criticized is because it looks like still a polarized model. You know, we have the pyramid of hierarchy, and then we have the inverse pyramid, but it's still a pyramid. And that's why, you know, the leadership of the circle, somehow, that everyone is at the service of the others. I think that's a model that is appealing.
Yes, it is. And
yeah, good point.
I feel you reminded me, if I just interject this, Roger Schwartz, who wrote The Skilled Facilitator and Smart Leaders, Smarter Teams about leadership. He talks in his model when leaders first hear about what we would call Agile, he's not necessarily talking about Agile, but when leaders hear about these Agile principles, they go, oh, I'm a servant leader. That means I'll just let the team do it. And they what tends to happen is that a leader who hears this for the first time just steps back and just says, I'm making the coffee, or not even that. Let the team figure it out. And suddenly you're asking, what's going on here? Like, oh, the team will figure it out. That's not the role of the leader. That's giving up leadership. That's not generating mutual leadership. That's giving up leadership, according to Roger Schwartz. And when you give up leadership, at some point it fails. And then the natural reaction is to snap back the other direction. Say, well, the problem is we didn't have enough strong leadership. We just make our command and control leadership even stronger. So when give up leadership fails, you get more command and control leadership than you even had at the beginning. And I see that happening so much in Agile organizations. It's working with the leaders to understand maybe I won't use the word servant leadership, but what does this leadership mean where you're working together with the team? It's not giving up leadership. It's participatory leadership, mutual learning leadership. That's where the success lies, I think.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Steve. Lois, is the answer good for you?
Yes, thanks a lot, Oana. Good perspective you brought also. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that. Reminded me of it. Yeah, that's the best there, Oana.
Oh, thank you. It's true that it's something that is very precious to me. So yeah,
yeah, that's why we get along. That's why when we met, we're like, oh, let's keep talking. Let's do these kind of things. Yeah.
So it's 7:01 p.m. There's a number of people that just came in to the meeting, so I don't know exactly why. So even now I admit people. Nevertheless, it was at 6 p.m. CST time, so I wonder if it's not a confusion on timing. Anyways, we are 2 minutes after 7, but if you're okay, or the people are okay on this passionate discussion, given that we also started a little bit late, I'm happy to take a couple more questions from the audience.
I'm happy to do that, because we did get with the links, we got a bit of a late start. I'm really happy.
Yeah, we started a little bit late with the hustle with the link. Yeah.
When it's over, it's over, but it's not over yet. So I'm okay to keep going.
Yeah. Actually, I think that the people that got the time wrong, that showed up at 7, but that's okay. The right people are here at the right time. So Is there any other question from the audience? If not, I'm sorry. If not, I can ask you. I have tons of questions, Lee.
I bet.
Mauricio.
Yeah, thank you very much, Oana. Hey, Steve. Yeah, sorry, I believe there was some miscalculation in the calendar or something. That may be why, but we are here. We are Agile. So I just have one question about the leadership, Steve. In a lot of organizations, especially in big ones, apart from the common, like the silos and everything, we see this trouble in leadership, especially in the middle layer. So maybe the top layer, the CXOs, they buy into Agile. They don't have a problem with it. And the bottom layer as well, like the developers, maybe if the Scrum Masters were, everyone in that layer are still in that. But when you go in that sandwich into that middle layer, into the VPs, into the directors, and they see that the status quo is shifting and they don't see themselves in a leadership position, how can we handle that, or what is the next step, the future for that middle ground?
Yeah, that's a big question that I also struggle with. First, I think that middle leadership area is a really uncomfortable place to be. So I first want to, think that in this middle layer, that must be one of the hardest places to be, because if you're at the top layer, you got a great job, potentially anyway, is set the vision and what a great thing to do. And at the bottom, you're like, oh, I'm producing, I'm making software, I'm building software, I'm doing whatever else, we're creating our products. That's a pretty exciting place to be, especially if you're motivated by getting things done. And when you're in the middle, you're just squeezed both directions. And I think at the middle layer, people really feel very clearly that they've got to make this stuff work. So they're really pulled every direction, and there's where the weight of the world is on your shoulders. So what's the future there? I'm just kind of a cop out, but how do we create empathy for what's happening at this middle layer? Because I mean, it's really easy for the people in the first flight level, near the ground, to say, oh, those middle managers are just in my way. And it's really easy for the people at the third flight level, at the flying high in the sky, to say, oh, those middle managers are just not implementing my vision. So how difficult it must be in that second flight level, that middle layer. So I think, let's just create some empathy. Let's just have some empathy and understanding there first. What do we do for the future? I think people are really, people have been asking for years, and we're also just starting to ask, how do we do career paths, and how do we do human resources and hiring in an agile way? If your entire hiring structure is based on moving up levels and getting more until you retire, that's not going to be conducive. That's going to create that sort of uncomfortable middle layer rather than help. So I really admire my colleagues that are doing a lot of work with HR, the Agile HR, and I think when we were talking about understanding that there's different ways to lead in this open space leadership of making invitations and holding the space for those things to happen, there's where the middle, when this middle layer management is able to lead in this way, it's opening up a bunch of horizons. And then the question is, how does that fit with my management objectives, and how does that fit with my career path? And there's where we're going to need to be asking questions. I wonder, because I reached a certain age. My birthday was yesterday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. I just worked that
Congratulations.
in. I just worked that in there, didn't I? So I've reached a certain age, and I've noticed that, I would have thought I was impossibly old when I first graduated from college. Who is this impossibly old person? Now, I don't feel any older than when I graduated from college, but I just remember that I would have thought I was old when I graduated from college. But I feel the same age as when I graduated. But I think, where am I going with this? I'm started to travel. The folks in the mid-20s have experienced a different way of going to school than I experienced. They've experienced a different way of communicating because, I was one of the first people in my school to have a computer, but it wasn't in my pocket as an iPhone, that. So the layers go away because of retirement, and I'm really excited at the new ways of leadership that are coming now, that are working at the so-called lower layer probably right now, at the lower flight levels. I'm really excited to just be open to what kind of leadership that they have learned. I also don't think they have all the answers, because I'm old enough to think, yeah, I thought I knew everything when I was 20, and now I realize I didn't know everything when I was 20. So I think there's a lot of place for everybody to talk to each other. But I don't know. I don't have I guess I'm saying I don't have a perfect answer for your question. I understand where that problem lies, and I think that creating space for communication and empathy is a lot of the ways of finding the future. What do you think? Let me ask you what you think. I should have asked that to begin with. That was the winning answer. So what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think that, yeah, empathy is the first thing that we should all be doing, and maybe we see it as I don't like a little bit of an ego. We see it as as that they don't create value and something like that, but they're there for a reason, and most of them have been there for some time, and they know the organizations, and they know the processes, and we need to leverage that. That said, my question is about, because as you're saying that eventually we're going to see that these new generations or this new way of working, especially with the coronavirus and everything, this accelerated everything times 10 years into the future. And but the thing that I've been seeing in a lot of teams, in a lot of areas, I work in a large organization, is that when we're trying to do the agile transformation, especially, it's this middle layer, the one that is the one that is resistant to change the most. So how can we work with them? And the language is very powerful. If you take out the vice president or even the manager from their title, it doesn't matter if they're doing the exact same responsibilities. They don't like it, and this is the worst. I don't want to say the worst part, but the one that is the one that we're having more trouble with, especially in the transformation part.
Yeah. Well, I see the exact same thing. It'd be surprising if I said no, I don't see the same thing. But I see the exact same thing, and I also think I keep coming back to it's the directors and the VPs who feel the need to hold it all together. So I still come back to looking at different ways to lead. That doesn't mean you're the person stuck in the middle that holds it all together. I don't have a good answer to that title issue, because of course I would like that good title, that senior title too. It's worth more money. It looks good on my LinkedIn. It makes you trust me, supposedly. I want that title too. So I'm not quite sure what the answer there is, but of course I recognize it's a huge thing. We do tend to, I do think we go back to this idea that we come in with Agile and we give the impression that, okay, now you're Agile, the teams just do everything. We even give the impression there's no place for the manager except to do the annual review and sit back and find out what the team's done. And so, of course, first we go in and we say, okay, you're no longer a vice president, you're a scrum master. Like, what? How long have I been in my career to be told that I have a title that's the same as you go to a 2-day course for? What are you telling me? But on the other hand, I'm not sure we do a really great. We struggle to show the people that in these levels how they really contribute to the success of the work. So we're giving the idea that, yeah, you're not really that valuable, and we're going to take away your valuable title. So I guess I'd start with how can you be really valuable no matter what your title is, and then I'm rarely called into, just by coincidence, I'm not called into companies where that's the decision that's on the table. But I mean, I guess if I had my magic wand or I could dream about it, I'd say, work on making how this layer of management is relevant first, and then allow them to work on the title. That's a really easy answer, because I'm not usually working in the companies where that's the question. So I don't have to give an actual answer. I can give my magic wand answer, but I guess that's what comes to mind.
Frederick from the audience has a very good point about the managers. Is listen to them, empathize, and take away their fears. And if I may, I would say, and empathize, saying why actually we've put them in a place where they are threatened. Mm-hmm. That's why they are this stuck layer of people. Mm-hmm. They with all these transformations, maybe we have put them in places where they feel threatened. They were on a path of success, and then we feel threatened. Frederick, do you want to come over and say more on that?
Well, yeah. Hello, I'm Frederick. That's exactly the what I want to share. You have to understand it from their position, and I think you nailed it there. They were on a path to a certain career, stepping up the ladder, and then there is this change happening, and yeah, they're lost, in fact. So yeah. Although they can step into a new role, a new agile role, it is different. They need to behave different. They need to interact differently, and well, yeah, you have to give them time, and you need to help them. But forcing it, that doesn't.
Yeah.
Doesn't help.
Okay.
You reminded me of a manager I worked with many years ago, so I'd completely forgotten. And it was kind of the situation. This was just what worked for this one manager in this context. I couldn't say it ever worked for anybody else. But they were wanting to reorganize their entire department for this large telecom, very well-known large telecom organization. And they kept talking about, they spent so much time, how are we going to assign people to teams that it all works out? And this idea of self-forming teams was a new trend. The book on self-forming teams hadn't come out yet, but lots of people were talking about self-forming teams. And I just kept asking, well, what would happen if you let the teams form themselves? And there was, oh, that could never happen. And sometimes I'm just stubborn. I just kept asking the same question over and over and over again until they finally, over several meetings, till they finally said, okay, we'll allow the teams to organize themselves. And by doing that, by allowing the self-organizing teams, that was the first message that teams got, that this agile is real. The boss isn't assigning me. Mm. So what's this middle manager to do? And like I said, this is just work for him. This middle manager said, oh, this was amazingly successful. So what am I going to do as a middle manager? He wrote an article within the company and told the whole company that he was an expert on self-forming teams. And then he went around the company helping other teams self-organize. And I met him years later. He says, wow, I've had the best career because you taught me about self-organizing teams, and now everybody in this huge company looks to me as the expert in that. I'm like, okay, that's what worked for him. He found a place where he could have an impact in the company, and it was not the way he thought it was going to be as a director and then a vice president. It was as an expert of self-forming teams, and that worked for him. You reminded me of that just now. I'd forgotten about that completely. But
yeah. Thank you, Steve. If that's okay for you, Mauricio and Frederick, we can move on to the next question. Okay, thank you. Cynthia, you have a question.
Well, it really wasn't a question. It was more like a continuation and kind of back to when we first kicked off this whole set of events. Like we said, like being agile is a team sport, but if we had to do it again, we would start with the top. So I think we need to, I mean, if we were talking about the future of agile, then we need to think about like what is business agility and what is the essence of agile. So like I speak a lot about focus, accomplish, reflect, which is basically the essence of Scrum. Like we focus on something, we accomplish it, and we reflect and decide, which is like retro. So it's basically retrospective. Are we in the right direction or not? And businesses need to change and start thinking that way, or else they're going to go out of business because our world economy is changing just that quickly. So the ones that see opportunities and are able to pivot are doing well. Those who can't aren't. So, and another thing we need to also acknowledge is that the agile that we're talking about at a team level, there's still product management, there's still project management, there's still program, whatever it is, those roles have to be decided, and they need to be decided top down how we organize. So I think the number one thing is that we need to be sure that we work, before we start training the teams, we need to work with management so that they can understand their roles and responsibilities. Maybe they need to be trained in what it means to be agile so they can decide what an agile organization looks like. So then they organize the right teams, they train the right people, and they also realize that they can be flexible. So maybe it's not for, Steve or me or Frederick or anybody to decide that, because that's why they get paid the big bucks. For us, it's to encourage them to think about this before we get started, to make the right decision so it'll succeed. If not, it's very hard to push agility up. And then you're also not organizing, so you give management the statistics and information that they need. So really, Steve, it's not that you don't have the answers, that you just need to ask when you go into an assignment. We need to ask those kinds of questions, because it's for those guys that make the big bucks. And if they can't answer the question, then it's not for us to say that maybe they're not their job, but we need to make them understand so that they can make a decision, so that they feel good about what's happening with people who are doing things, focus, accomplish, reflect, and constantly getting information from whatever application is tracking that, so that they can make very quick business decisions. So it's not just like my project got done more quickly, it's that I'm constantly at all levels of the organization reevaluating our position, because the world may have changed. Just like when we woke up one day, we're not in lockdown, now we're in lockdown, and now my whole business is different. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because that's like the conversation when it comes that we need to think about.
Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree. I can only agree with everything you said. So thank you for that. Yeah, it raises a question for me, because I get called into work where I get called into work, and often it's not at the place where I can ask the questions you talked about. It's where I can work with the team, or the middle management. And so that's a big question for me as well. How, I do believe those who's asking those questions with the top level where they're paid the big bucks. And if it's not me, what happens? Do I find a different place to impact the organization? It wouldn't be that organization, because that's not where they've asked me. Do I come in the organization? Do I find influence? I'm just, I'm like, that's raising questions for me in that sense, and it's very important. So I'm glad you asked that. And
I think it's in the interview process. Like, for instance, I've gone into companies that aren't agile, and like the VP goes, and I'm going to be the product owner. And then you're just like, sir, you are so important. You have meetings all day, this and that and the other thing. The product owner in Agile is someone who represents the customer. You don't have the time to like do, and you explain to him the roles and responsibilities because they don't even know. And so then it's like, then you kind of have to like get into a different type of conversation. But if a director or somebody hires you, you should always, like in those initial negotiations, figure out like what the holistic story is. I mean, at the end of the day, they're either going to become more agile or they're not going to become more agile. You're going to do the best you can, but it's always better it's kind of like before you get any job, it's always better to try to influence the outcome. After that, you can decide, well, I mean, I still get X, I'm still going to make money. I still know what I know. They may not know what they know, but the results may not be as intended, but you at least need to give them the opportunity, and then you can decide whether or not you want to take the gig or not take the gig, right?
I so hear that.
Yeah. What I see important here as an important point is from a leadership point of view, I'm getting back to the agile leadership, is the skill to ask good questions. Also, it reminds me that, and empower people to take decisions. That's another thing. Okay, so we went well over the time because I'm pretty sure there was a confusion about timing. A lot of people came after about 7 p.m. CET time, which was the time of the end of this of this. So that's why I've let a little bit longer go until 7:30. And we have 5 minutes until 7:30. So is there any other question that you want to ask Steve about Agile leadership?
You have a question. In the context of like Agile portfolio management, one of my observations is whenever those discussions occur in the community, in context of leadership, it tends to only be exclusively framed around investment, funding, and alignment to strategy, right? However, real enterprise portfolio management is so much more dynamic than that. And so I guess I'm curious to get your point of view or perspective on, like, as a community, right, and, talk in the context of leadership, where you feel like we are in terms of our maturity and our thought leadership, specifically around the area of like portfolio management.
Yeah, gee. I
Go ahead, man. Take your best stab at it, man. Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah. I think we got a long way to go. I think in many areas where we're doing work in Agile coaching and consulting, we come in saying that we have the answers when we don't. So I think we've got a long way. And I think you just really pointed that out. I mean, there's really more to that Agile portfolio management than I thought about and that many other Agile coaches have thought about. So when you're called there, what does that mean? How do you hold the space for the experts that are really experts there and allow them to have their fears about the change that's happening, but also allow them to teach you about what it is that they're doing, because it's important. And we're just so easy. I mean, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for anybody else, but I know it's really easy for me to dismiss those concerns and go, oh, let's just be agile. And all those concerns aren't very valid, because, I mean, thank you for pointing out that there's a lot more to this portfolio management than I know about. I do really love, I mean, I just have to say the book that I have most recently read about this is the Klaus Leopold's work on flight levels. And I like the way I can only say I really like the way he talks about this. And I would always look to some of the work that he's doing there. In that, I guess, I would just really point to there as the place where I go to look in that situation. Now, something that I've also noticed, you know, we are agile salesmen, and it was Cynthia, you kind of spoke about sales in a way, in some way it triggered this idea, this memory for me. Our agile salesmen go in and sell this great dream of agile. You come in and you take our training course and you do Scrum for 3 sprints, and then you're agile and you get all of these benefits. And we learn by practicing, and the kind of practice we need to get those benefits that we're selling to people, that's 2 to 3 years of really hard work at all levels of the company. So we've done a we've done ourselves a disservice by selling this simplistic approach that it's almost like here's our silver bullet. People are moving away from this now, but this was so often the case. Here's our silver bullet. Yeah. You get your team doing Scrum, and then you're going to get these wonderful results. Of course, you and I both know that in 3 sprints, that company's not going to have those wonderful results. And so people are going, where's the results you promised us? Maybe Agile doesn't work. And I think maybe what you're making me think, Todd, is, yeah, we really need to do better about selling. And Cynthia, with your question as well, we really got to do better of negotiating what it is and what we're providing. And it is a process, and it is a journey, and it's not going to happen. We're going to get lots of results after 3 sprints, but it's not going to be all of these great things that we've sold to you after 6 weeks. Not after 6 weeks. That's 2 to 3 years down the road. And let's look at the whole journey that's going to take us to get there, so we can successfully get there. Because we can. Many teams have gotten there, but they didn't get there in 6 weeks. They got there in 3 years or more.
Thank you.
I don't know. How'd that do, Todd?
Yeah.
Tell me what you think, because I think you probably thought about this more than I have. So,
how are we going with the answer? Is the answer okay? Okay.
Todd has muted his call, so either his dog started barking or something. But
okay, thank you. This was such a great point, Steve. Patience, and there's no transformation overnight.
Yeah.
And maybe another quality of a leader is patience. What do you think about that? Trust and patience.
Absolutely, patience, trust, expectation. Patience and expectations go hand in hand. You can expect anything, but are you expecting it to happen in a realistic time frame or not? Yeah, patience and trust. Let's go with that.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So I can take a last question if there's a very, very urgent question that you have. Any of the participants have? If not, okay. So if there is no other question, I thank you all for being here with us. Those that are, for those of you that are with us since 6 p.m. So thank you for finding the time to go over time. For those of us that joined us at 7 p.m. that for some reason there was a confusion about time, thank you for staying with us. And this is registered, and it's on YouTube Live. So I will post both links of the recording. It's recorded, not registered. Sorry, this is from French, so it's recorded. And those of you that didn't see the beginning could see the beginning on the recording. So thank you very much. Have a pleasant day or a pleasant evening. And thank you, Steve, for being with us today.
Well, thank you so much, because it's fun for me. It's a lot of fun for me. So thank you so much for the invitation. It's always fun to speak with you, Oana, always.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to speak to you too. So have a great day or have a great night. Myself, Oana Juncu, at your service, an Agile Leadership DJ, invite you to participate to the other dialogues next week. And there's one tomorrow in French. And also, please, before I leave, I will put again the link to the mural. You can put your insights from this interview there, and there will be a huge sketch picture at the end of February with your ideas. So please contribute now or later. Go on the link and share your thoughts there. Bye for now. Bye-bye.